Okay. So in the previous class, we had seen that we could implement linear convolution by means of circular convolution, right? And we had interpreted circular convolution as a primarily as the linear convolution. Okay. And you had also seen how we can implement linear convolution using the discrete Fourier transform. So for that, all you need to do is you need to perform a L plus P minus 1 point circular convolution. And you know that you can implement circular convolution in the frequency domain by means of the product of the individual DFTs and by computing the inverse discrete Fourier transform. This we have discussed in the previous class. This is how we interpreted linear convolution as the circular convolution as the linear convolution of time aliasing. So we'll just go back to the presentation that we had seen to illustrate that circular convolution is time aliased linear convolution. So are you seeing this example?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we see that we have two sequences, x1n and x2n. In this case, we are taking x1n to be equal to x2n with the length of the sequence to be equal to 6. That is, L is taken as 6 and P is also equal to 6. And if you do the linear convolution of the two sequences, we will get this x3n. So x3n is the linear convolution of x1n with x2n, where x1n and x2n are the same, right? So this is the linear convolution. You see that it increases in this fashion. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is when all the samples overlap. Then this is when the second sequence moves out of the first sequence. And you see that there are 6 plus 6 minus 1, that is 11 samples in the output sequence. So now what we'll do is we'll form a periodic sequence with a periodicity of equal to 6. That is, we are going to do a 6-point circular convolution. So what we'll do is we will form a periodic sequence by shifting this sequence by 6 samples. So we will shift this sequence by 6 samples in the positive direction and in the negative direction, and then we will add up the overlapping samples. So the overlapping samples from 0 to L minus 1. So here we have taken n is equal to L is equal to 6. So 0 to L minus 1. So n is equal to L. Therefore, we will compare these two sequences now. We will compare, this is the linear convolution of the two sequences, and this is the circular convolution of the two sequences. So we will see that the first sample is different for the circular convolution and the linear convolution. Second sample is again different. The third sample is again different. Fourth sample is again different. Fifth is also different. However, you see that the sixth sample is the same for both linear convolution and the circular convolution. So here you see that the first 5 samples are incorrect, and the sixth sample of the circular convolution of x1n and x2n, that is a 6-point circular convolution of x1n and x2n, is the same as the sixth sample of the linear convolution of x1n and x2n. I hope this is okay. So this is the circular convolution of circular convolution being interpreted as linear convolution with time aliasing. So now you have this very important result which states that circular convolution of the two finite length sequences is the linear convolution of the two sequences followed by time aliasing, and circular convolution corresponds to the linear convolution if and only if n is greater than or equal to L plus P minus 1. That is, if n is greater than or equal to L plus P minus 1. So here when you do a 11-point circular convolution, so if you can do an 11-point circular convolution, in that case, you will get the circular convolution and the linear convolution yielding the same result. Okay. So this is when an 11-point circular convolution. Here we are taking a 12-point circular convolution. So you need n to be greater than or equal to L plus P minus 1. So L being equal to 6, P being equal to 6. So L plus P minus 1 is equal to 11. Therefore, n has to be greater than or equal to 11. In this example, we have taken n to be equal to 12. So which means all these samples will be correct if and only if we have n greater than or equal to L plus P minus 1. Right? So our conclusion is that circular convolution will give you the same samples as the linear convolution if and only if you take an n-point circular convolution where n is greater than or equal to L plus P minus 1. So we have seen two examples there, one where we did a 6-point circular convolution and the second example where we did a 12-point circular convolution. So for the 6-point circular convolution, you saw that the first 5 samples were incorrect and the 6th sample was correct. And for the 12-point circular convolution, you saw that all the samples were correct. So it is instructive to find out how many samples of the result of the circular convolution correspond to the same values for that of the linear convolution. Okay. So say suppose we had done a 6-point circular convolution, we have found out that the first 5 samples were incorrect and the 6th sample was the same as that of the linear convolution. So now let us consider L, that is the length of the signal, to be greater than P, which is the length of the second signal. So normally the second, instead of the second signal, will be looking at a filter. So here we have taken, we are assuming the circular convolution of 2 sequences, X1n and X2n. So let us say that L is the length of X1n and the P is the length of X2n, and we have L as greater than P, and then we will be doing an L-point circular convolution. So we know that some of these samples are incorrect and some of these samples are correct. Now, we had seen earlier that this circular convolution of 2 sequences is one cycle of the periodic convolution, and it's one cycle of the L periodic sequence given by x3p of n is equal to sigma r equal to minus infinity to plus infinity, x3 of n plus rl for 0 less than or equal to n less than or equal to n minus 1, and it's equal to 0 otherwise. So we'll illustrate this here. So we have 2 sequences here. The first sequence is x1n. It's an 8-point sequence. See? The first 5 samples are all equal to 1 and the last 3 samples are equal to 2. So x1 of n is an 8-point sequence and x2n is a 4-point sequence. So this is an 8-point sequence and this is a 4-point sequence. And here we compute the linear convolution of x1n and x2n like this. So this is the linear convolution of the 2 sequences. So when you do linear convolution of the 2 sequences, how many samples will be there? This is an 8-point sequence. This is a 4-point sequence. So how many samples will be there? That will be 8 plus 4 minus 1. That will be 11 samples. So you see that there are 11 samples. So starting from 0, the sample 0 to the sample 10. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is the last sample. So there will be L plus P minus 1 sample. So this is a 0th sample. And in general, you can write this as the L plus P minus 2th sample. So from 0 to L plus P minus 2, there are total number of L plus P minus 1 samples, right? This is the linear convolution of the 2 sequences. Now, with this sequence, we will form a periodic sequence by shifting this out by L samples. So L in this case was equal to 8, right? So this is x3 of n, and now by shifting this in the negative direction by 8 samples, we have x3 of n plus 8. So we'll generalize and write x3 of n plus L, x3 of n plus L, and then this is x3 of n minus L. This is shifted out in the positive direction by 8 samples. And now what we will have is we will add x3 of n plus x3 of n plus L plus x3 of n minus L, and then we will look at the samples from 0 to L minus 1. So the samples from 0 to L minus 1 are mapped here. So let us compare this with the original sequence. So this is a circularly convolved sequence. We will compare this with the original linear convolution sequence. So we see that the first sample is incorrect, right? The first sample is incorrect. The second sample is also incorrect. The third sample is incorrect, right? And after a while, you see that some of the samples are correct. So here, the last sample is correct, last but one sample is correct, etc., etc. So some of the samples are correct. So starting from this point onwards, the samples from this point onwards, the samples from here to here are seen to be the same as that of linear convolution. Okay, so we'll see a general formulation for this. So observing that circular convolution is linear convolution with time aliasing, it is observed that from this example they figure that the first p minus 1 sample, that is from 0 to p minus 2 of the L point circular convolution sequence will be time aliasing. Okay, so what is happening is what was the value for L was equal to 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what was the value for P? P was equal to 4. So you see that the first 3 samples are different here. So these first 3 samples are not the same as the first 3 samples of the sequence. So you can see that these 3 samples and here these 3 samples are different. However, you see that the 4th sample is the same here. 4th sample is same, that is a sample p minus 1 is the same for both this linear convolution and the circular convolution sequence. So p minus 1, this sample is correct. You see that the next sample is also the same as this sample. Again, these 3 samples are the same as these 3 samples. So you see that the first p minus 1 samples, that is from 0 to p minus 2 are incorrect, and the samples from p minus 1 to L minus 1 are correct. Is that clear? So this is a very important result. So when you circularly convolve 2 sequences with the values as follows, you have a sequence with a length L and you have another sequence with a length P such that L is greater than P. Now, I will ask one of you to answer. Is Dev Ganesh present today?
Yes, sir.
Dev, കഴിഞ്ഞ ക്ലാസ്സിൽ നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു ഇതപ്പോ ഇന്നത്തെ ക്ലാസ്സായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടുള്ള ചോദ്യമല്ല. So if you are doing a circular convolution and if you require that all the samples of the circular convolution are the same as that of the linear convolution, what should be the value of n? Length of the signal is L, length of the second signal is P, or length of the filter is P. So you know that the linear convolution will have L plus P minus 1 samples. So you should be doing at least how many in the circular convolution for the result to be the same?
Equal to L plus P minus 1.
It should be at least equal to L plus P minus 1. Now, suppose if you are doing an L point circular convolution with the L being the length of the first sequence and P being the length of the second sequence, then you see that, and you also assume that L is greater than P, then you see that the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect, right? And the rest of the samples First P minus 1 samples would be from 0 to P minus 2. And the rest of the samples from P minus 1, since you are doing an L point circular convolution, you will have L samples. Rest of the samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1 are correct. So as verified for this example, you see that the first 3 samples are incorrect when you compare X3 of n and X3P of n. And you see that the samples numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, samples numbered 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are correct. That is the samples from P minus 1. P minus 1. So P was equal to 4 in our example, right? So P minus 1 is 3. So sample number 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. The sample number 3 to L minus 1. L was equal to 7. L was equal to 8. So L minus 1 is equal to 7. So the samples number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are correct for this example. So this is easily understood by observing that circular convolution is one cycle of the result of the circular convolution is one cycle of a periodic sequence. And the periodic sequence is formed by adding x3 of n, x3 of n plus L, x3 of n minus L, x3 of n plus 2L, x3 of n minus 2L, etc. etc. So you take one period of that. So this will give you the period of x3p of n. Okay, so we will now illustrate this by looking at this sequence x3 of n alone. We will not look at the next period. So let us look at x3 of n. So we will mark 0 to L plus P minus 2. So this is the last sample. 0 to L plus P minus 2. So this sample is L plus P minus 2. So L being equal to 8. Again, we will recollect that L is equal to 8. And P is equal to 4. So L plus P minus 2 is equal to 8 plus 4 L plus P minus 1 is equal to 8 plus 4 minus 1, that's equal to 11. So there will be 11 samples. That is, the samples will be from 0 to 10. 0 to 10. 10 being equal to L plus P minus 2. So let us now verify whether this is the case. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is the 10th sample. So now let us look at the last P minus 1 samples in this case. We will look at the last P minus 1 samples which have been marked here. Last P minus 1 is last 3 samples. These are the last 3 samples which are marked in yellow. So these are marked as yellow squares, where these are marked as red circles. Now, you have an x3 of n plus L overlapping the first 3 samples, x3 of n plus L. That is equivalent to wrapping around the last 3 samples over the first 3 samples. So what we will do is we will add the sample to the first sample. So like this here. So to this we will add the sample here. And to the second sample we will add this sample. Right? So that is shown here. And to the third sample we will add this sample. So that is shown here. So in effect what we have is we have the last P minus 1 samples wrapping around the first P minus 1 samples. So we will take the last P minus 1 samples and that will be wrapped around to the first P minus 1 samples. Is that clear? So since it is wrapped around, you see that all these values are incorrect. These values are incorrect. These values will be therefore different because you have an addition here. Whereas for these samples, you don't have anything to wrap around. So there is nothing to be added here. There is nothing to be added here. So these samples are correct. Is that understood? So our conclusion is that the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. That is, the samples from 0 to P minus 2 are incorrect. And the samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1 are correct. Okay. So can someone repeat this? Meenakshi, when you do an L point circular convolution, how many samples are incorrect?
0 to P minus 1 samples are incorrect.
No, the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. So that will be 0 to first P minus 1 samples, P minus 2. First P minus 1 samples should be from 0 to P minus 2. So that is very important. Samples from 0 to P minus 2 are incorrect. So please get that clear. 0 to P minus 2 are incorrect. And which all samples are correct?
From P minus 1 to L minus 1.
How many samples are there from P minus 1 to L minus 1? How many samples are there from P minus 1 to L minus 1? So you can just check now. How many samples are correct? So P minus 1 and L minus 1 would be L minus 1 minus P minus 1 plus 1. That would be L minus
P plus 1.
P plus 1. So the last L minus P plus 1 samples will be correct. So we will summarize that. Observing that circular convolution is linear convolution with time aliasing, we can see that the first P minus 1 samples, that is from 0 to P minus 2 of the L point circular convolution will be time aliasing. So they are incorrect therefore. However, there is no time aliasing for the samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1. That is the last L minus P plus 1 samples. And thus these samples return the same value as linear convolution of the two sequences. So this is a very important result. So we have seen that if you do an L plus P minus 1 point circular convolution, there is absolutely no difference between the results of circular and linear convolutions. However, if you are doing an L point circular convolution, you see that the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect and the last L minus P plus 1 samples are correct. So that is our takeaway from this. Okay. Now, this is what we had seen in the second part of the discussion. This may be alternately viewed as taking the last P minus 1 samples of X3 of n and wrapping around this to the first P minus 1 samples of X3 of n. That is, you see that the samples from L to L plus P minus 2 are added to the samples from 0 to P minus 2. So therefore, the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. And the samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1 will be correct. So this is what we had discussed. Now we will see why this is all very important. We had initially discussed the relevance of linear convolution. Now we will just again revise the concept of linear convolution, and I will ask someone, what is the physical significance of linear convolution? I will ask that to Arvind Parad. Why should you study linear convolution? What is the significance of linear convolution?
So because every system will have some memory, and so it can be represented only by convolution operation.
By a linear convolution operation. So we will just reframe your sentence, your statement like this. Every linear time invariant system can be represented by its impulse response, and the output of the system can be represented as a linear convolution of the input with the impulse response. So there was a key word there, every linear time invariant system. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
What is a linear system? We will look at both linearity and time invariance. What is a linear system? What is a linear system? It should be very obvious to everyone. What is a linear system? It should obey linearity property, right? Arvind?
Hello, sir.
Okay. What is a linear system? A linear system should obey linearity.
Linearity.
Okay. Linearity means there is some theorem associated with the linearity.
Theorem.
Superposition theorem. So which means you should obey additivity and homogeneity. So the system should obey additivity and homogeneity. Not only that, the system should also be time invariant, which means the behavior of the system should not change with respect to time. Now, which is the first semiconductor device that you had studied in your BTech curriculum? Anyone can answer. Well, it's a diode. Diode, is it a linear device or a non-linear device?
Non-linear.
It's a non-linear device. What is the second semiconductor device that you had studied?
BJT.
It was a BJT. A bipolar junction transistor, is it a linear device or a non-linear device?
Non-linear.
It's a non-linear device. So it's a non-linear device which can be made to operate in a very small linear region called as the active region by properly biasing the circuit, right?
Yes.
So even if you have the simplest of the semiconductor devices, that system is not going to be linear. If you have a transistor, if you have a diode, if you have any semiconductor device, that is not going to be a linear system. So, and the system behavior is not going to remain constant for all time. Because if you take one system in the lab and if you take it outside to the field, and if the field conditions are different from that of the lab conditions, then the behavior of the system could be different. Likewise, if you have electronic components or any component for that matter, any component can age, and therefore with age, the behavior of the system also can change. So this linear time invariance of a system is only something that exists on paper. Is that understood? Linearity and time invariance are properties that exist on paper. You cannot model any system as, you cannot say that any system is linear or time invariant. Practical systems are non-linear and time variant. However, you have to start somewhere. For analyzing systems, you have to start somewhere. So in limited circumstances, you might model these systems as linear time invariant systems. Okay, so we will not go further into those discussions. So any linear time invariant system can be modeled as a linear convolution. So that is a physical significance of linear convolution, which means to model an amplifier, you cannot model an amplifier by a multiplier in the time domain. You have to model the amplifier as a convolution operator in the time domain. It's not going to be a multiplication, it's going to be a convolution operator. So that is why you have to study linear convolution. Now, can someone tell me what is the significance of circular convolution? Anyone of you can tell me what is the significance of circular convolution? Why should you study circular convolution? What is the significance of circular convolution?
It provides a faster way to compute linear convolution.
That is the only reason. So there is a significance for circular convolution only because of the circular convolution theorem, right? You had a equivalent DTFT theorem, which is called as the convolution theorem, which is if you linearly convolve two sequences, then in the frequency domain, it is equivalent to multiplying the individual DTFTs of the two sequences. That is, if you have the sequences x1n and x2n, then in the frequency domain, it is just the product of x1 e power j omega and x2 e power j omega. Now, if you sample x1 e power j omega and x2 e power j omega, such that you get x1k and x2k, so we will also assume that x1k and x2k are of the same length, n. And if you multiply the product of x1k and x2k, the product also will have a length equal to n. So what we are having is a element sample by sample multiplication. So let us call x3k is equal to x1k into x2k. So that also has got n samples. Then its time domain equivalent is a circular convolution of x1n and the x2n. That circular convolution is an n-point circular convolution. You study circular convolution only because if you multiply the DTFT, if you multiply the discrete spectra, that results in a circular convolution. And now the circular convolution is only a means to implement linear convolution. So what you need is linear convolution. You do not need circular convolution. You use circular convolution as a tool to implement linear convolution because that is how you can represent a linear time invariant system. Okay. So when you filter a signal, you will be using a filter H of n to filter a signal X of n. So let us now go to the whiteboard. Are you seeing the whiteboard now? Abhishek, whiteboard ആണ് കാണുന്നത് അതോ presentation ആണ് കാണുന്നത് ഇപ്പോൾ?
So whiteboard.
You're seeing it. Okay. So now let us represent this linear convolution operator by means of circular convolution, and let's see how we can use the circular convolution theorem to implement linear convolution. So in fact we have discussed that just right now, but we will extend that discussion to some other concept. We have to look at other factors also, like for example, sorry about this. I'm not comfortable even now with the whiteboard. So we have an X of n, and this filter may be represented by its impulse response H of n. Now we will restrict our discussions only to one kind of filters, which are called as FIR filters. So these filters are called as FIR filters. So what are FIR filters? What are FIR filters? Someone? Anyone?
Sir, finite impulse response.
Okay, what do you mean by finite impulse response?
So the duration is finite.
Right.
When you take the impulse response.
Right. So what is the other kind of filter? Other than
Sir,
if it's not
infinite.
FIR, it should be an infinite impulse response filter. So which is called as an IER filter. So here we will restrict our discussions only to FIR filters. So this is restricted only to FIR filters, right? Okay, so normally X of n, where does X of n come from? X of n comes from normally something from a real world signal. So let us consider that X of n, it comes from a microphone. So this is digitized, so you have some kind of an ADC, analog to digital converter. So this is X of t, and at the output you have X of n. Okay. So this is therefore a speech signal. Now, since it's a microphone, let us assume that this is speech signal. It could be anything. It could be temperature or pressure measured over distance or measured over time, etc. So let us now assume that this is a speech signal. So speech signal typically runs into many number of samples. Normally, if you are going to record human voice, in order to get the information content, it's enough to record up to 4 kilohertz. So up to 4 kilohertz will give you what is the information content. But this will give you the information content, but sometimes you will not be able to make out certain specific contents that make the speaker identification unique. So which means there are two problems here. So I'm slightly deviating from the concept, but I will just mention this here. There are two speech processing problems, which is speech recognition. One you call as speech recognition, and the second you call as speaker identification. Can you appreciate the difference between these two operations? Speech recognition, the aim is only to understand what is being spoken. The aim is not to find out who is speaking. Now, the speaker identification is a more complex task where the aim is also to find out who is speaking, right? So these are actually two different concepts. So speaker identification, speech recognition. And if your aim is only to do speech recognition, then up to recording up to 4 kilohertz is sufficient. So you see that you say that normally your audible frequency range is up to 20 kilohertz, but to understand which what message is being spoken, up to 4 kilohertz is usually sufficient. So that is why your telephone channel, your normal telephone channel records only up to 4 kilohertz. You don't require above 4 kilohertz, because through the telephone you only need to find out what is being spoken. You are not required to find out who is speaking. So when you sample it, when you have 4 kilohertz, which means the Nyquist rate is 8 kilohertz. Now assume that you are sampling at least 10 kilohertz. So 10 kilohertz is 10 into 10 raised to 3 cycles per second. So 10 into 10 raised to 3 hertz, that is 10 raised to 4 hertz. So therefore, the sampling interval t is equal to 0.1 millisecond. Sampling interval t is equal to 0.1 millisecond. So let us assume that you are recording over 1 second. How many samples will be there? In 1 second, how many samples will be there? Can you tell me in 1 second how many samples will be there? You have a 4 kilohertz signal. That is your speech signal being sampled at 10 kilohertz. So therefore, the time period is 0.1 millisecond. That's the sampling interval is 0.1 millisecond. So in 1 second, how many samples will be there? In 1 second, how many samples will be there? 1 second. രണ്ട് സാമ്പിളുകൾക്കിടയ്ക്കുള്ള ഇന്റർവെൽ 0.1 മില്ലിസെക്കൻഡ് ആണ്. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സെക്കൻഡിൽ എത്ര സാമ്പിളുകൾ ഉണ്ടാവും? റഫ് വാല്യൂ, എക്സാക്ട് ഒന്നും വേണ്ട, ഒരു സാമ്പിളിന്റെ വ്യത്യാസമൊക്കെ വന്നേക്കാം. ബട്ട് ഹൗ മെനി സാമ്പിൾസ് വിൽ ബി ദേർ ഇൻ 1 സെക്കൻഡ്? ഹലോ, ദിസ് ഇസ് ജസ്റ്റ് ഡിവിഷൻ. ആരോട് ചോദിക്കണത്? ഞാനത് അർജുൻ വിശ്വനാഥ്, ഒരു സെക്കൻഡിൽ എത്ര സാമ്പിളുകൾ ഉണ്ടാവും?
Hello, sir.
In 1 second, how many samples will be there for these?
1 by 0.1.
1 by 0.1. What is that? That is equal to 10 raised to
10 raised to
4 samples.
10 is 4.
10 raised to 4 samples. That is just in 1 second. That is just in 1 second. So in 10 seconds, it will be 10 raised to 5
10
samples.
into 10 raised to 5.
4, 10 raised to. In 100 seconds, that will be 10 raised to 6 samples. So that is going to be difficult, 10 raised to 6 samples. In 1000 seconds, that will be 10 raised to 7 samples, etc. Okay? Is that clear? So just for 1 second of speech, you have 10 raised to 4 samples. And the length of h of n, so let us say you have 10 raised to 4 samples here. That is just for 1 second. And the length of the filter would be around in the order around, so 100 samples. 100 samples. So you see that the length of the signal is usually much larger than the length of the filter, right? So length of the signal is L is far greater than the length of the filter. So that is what happens, especially if you are doing some temporal signal processing. Temporal means you have the domain as the time domain. So L is far greater than P. L is far greater than P. L being the length of the signal, P being the length of the filter. Okay. Now there are two issues here. The first issue is that you have to wait till you get all the samples. You have to wait till you get all the samples. Is that understood? Say, suppose if you want to record this video lecture, and then you have to process this video lecture. One way is to wait till all your samples are with you, which could be up to 6:30. Maybe you will have to wait till 6:30, and then you start your processing. Is it understood? So that does not seem to be a very good proposition. That also brings into consideration the heavy computational burden, and you require to wait till 6:30 to capture the entire video lecture and then start the processing. And you also need a heavy computational burden to complete the computation. So which means this is not a good option to filter a long sequence. So usually what you have is, in practice, what you have is you have sequences that are of practically infinity length, and you have filters that could be of finite duration. So in many applications such as filtering a speech waveform, the input signal is practically of infinite duration, and the filter could be of finite duration. Now, it is not practical to wait till you have captured all the input samples and then you start processing the signal. Doing offline filtering is impractical, as no output filtered samples can be collected until you have all the input samples with you. And now you require to process the signal as and when the signal comes, and the strategy that you use to employ process this infinite long sequence is known as block convolution. This is known as block convolution. So in block convolution, what you do is we segment the signal into blocks, and we will call the length of each block as L. So the block has got a length equal to L, each of which is filtered using the filter of length P. So now you have one block of the speech signal. Let us say that block is for, let us say, 100 millisecond. You process 100 millisecond speech, then you process the next 100 millisecond speech, and then you process the next 100 millisecond speech, and finally what you do is you combine the filtered output sections to yield the appropriate output signal. So that combination has to be done appropriately. So linear filtering, later we will see in the next module that this linear filtering can be implemented by using the discrete Fourier transform, as we had discussed in the beginning of this session, as very fast algorithms called as the fast Fourier transform algorithms are available for the computation of the discrete Fourier transform. Okay, so we will see what is the strategy for block convolution. Now, let us assume that H of n is a filter of length P. So what does it tell about the filter? What does it tell you about the filter? H of n is a filter of length P.
Finite duration.
It's a finite duration filter. It's an FIR filter. And the X of n is your signal. That is practically of infinity length. Length of the signal is far, far greater than P. And now we will also make the assumption that the signal is a causal signal. The signal is a causal signal. So which means you are making your observations from n is equal to 0 onwards. So we will represent X of n as a sum of shifted finite duration sequences of length L like this. So we will go to the figure first and then we will come back to the equation here. So this is our finite duration filter H of n. So there are P minus 1 samples, that is samples from 0 to P minus 2. This is a sample P minus 2. P minus 1 is this 0 sample. So H of n has got 0 to P minus 1 samples. The length of the filter H of n is P. So there are samples from 0 to P minus 1. So this is the sample 0 to P minus 1. And this is the signal X of n. you see that the length of x of n is very large, practically it's equal to infinity. So because it is continuing after this, it is going on up to infinity. Let us assume that this is a speech waveform. As we have seen, for just for 1 second, you will have 10 raised to 4 samples. For 10 seconds, you will have 10 raised to 5 samples. So you can then therefore imagine what would be the number of samples for, let us say, 1 hour or 2 hours. So here what we will do is, we will divide this into segments like this. So this is x of n. This is the first segment, x of n. So 0 to L minus 1. So the first segment has got a length equal to L. Okay. Now let us consider the second segment that starts from this point L onwards. So this onwards, this point L onwards, then we will go on up to 2L minus 1. So 2L minus 1. So we will consider this as the second segment. And now we will shift the second segment by L samples to the left, so that the second segment numbers, second segment indices also can be marked from 0 to L. Is it understood? So you have x0n, which are the first L samples of the sequence. Then you have x1 of n, which is the second set of L samples. And now we have shifted those second set of L samples to the left, so that the first index is starting from 0. Then again, we will have the third set of L samples. We will shift this by 2L samples to the left, so that the indices also can be marked from 0 to L minus 1. So these are the individual segments of the infinite length sequence. So this is the first segment. This is the second segment. This is the third segment. So if you append this to this part and this to this part, then you will be getting the entire sequence from 0 to this point. Right? Is it understood? I would appreciate a feedback. If you find any difficulty in appreciating the fact that each of the segment has to start from a 0, so you can ask now. There is a reason why this has to start from the index 0. What we are doing here is we are looking at the first segment, and the second segment is shifted left by L samples to make it start from the index 0. The third segment is shifted by 2L samples to make the index start from 0. Okay. So therefore, x of n you can write as sigma r equal to 0 to infinity. So mind you that we had assumed that x of n to be a causal sequence. That is why we have sigma r equal to 0 to infinity. Sigma r equal to 0 to infinity xr of n minus rl. Let us expand that. Xr of n minus rl over this summation would expand to x0 of n plus x1 of n minus l plus x2 of n minus 2l plus x3 of n minus 3l, etc. So again, let us go back to the figure. So this would be x0 of n plus x1 of n minus l. So which means this you have to shift by l samples to the right. So that this would be now starting from n plus x2 of n minus 2l. So which means this will be starting from 2l plus etc. So this is how we represent the sequence. Now, as we have seen, within each segment, the first sample is at n equal to 0, which means the 0th sample of xr of n is the rlth sample of x of n. This is rlth sample of x of n. Now, we had also discussed in the previous semester that the convolution is a linear operation, which means convolution obeys the superposition theorem, which means convolution obeys both additive and homogeneity property, and therefore the output of the filter can be written as y of n is equal to x of n convolved with h of n. Now we have x of n is equal to sigma r equal to 0 to infinity xr of n minus r. So we can now maybe convolve each xr of n minus rl with h of n and then add that. So therefore this you can write as sigma r equal to 0 to infinity yr of n minus rl, where each yr of n can be written as a convolution of XR of n with H of n. Is it understood? XR of n with H of n. So which means each YR of n will have a length. What will be the length? What is the length of XR of n? That is equal to P. Sorry, that is equal to L. What is the length of H of n? That is equal to P. So what is the length of YR of n? That will be equal to L plus P minus 1. Therefore, each YR of n will have a length of L plus P minus 1. So we will illustrate this now in this figure. So this is X naught of n. Here you have X1n, this is X2n, etc. Now this is to be controlled with an H of n. Again, this will be controlled with an H of n. And the result will be shifted by L samples. This will be controlled with H of n and the result will be shifted by 2L samples. So this is what you will be getting. So let us look at the first output. That is, we will look at Y0n. Y0n, how many samples will be there in Y0n? Y0n will be having L plus P minus 1 samples. So this is marked here. This is 0, 2, L plus P minus 2. There are L plus P minus 1 samples here. Right? So here you had only L samples. Now in X0 of n had only L samples, whereas Y0n had L plus P minus 1 samples. So there are additional samples here, additional number of samples here. Obviously these are different, the values are different, but you have more number of samples here. You have samples from L to L plus P minus 2. Likewise, this will be Y1 of n. Y1 of n will be starting from here and going on up to the samples. This is Y2 of n. And now, as we had seen, you need to add Y0n plus Y1n minus L plus Y2 of n minus 2L plus Y3 of n minus 3L, etc. So, which means you have to add all those. So, you see that there are samples that overlap. See, the samples from L to L plus V minus 2. The samples from L to L plus V minus 2. That is the last P minus 1 samples overlap with the first P minus 1 samples of Y1n. The last P minus 1 samples of Y0n overlaps with the first P minus 1 samples of Y1n. The last P minus 1 samples of Y1n overlap with the first P minus 1 samples of Y2n. So you have to add all these together. So if you take the sequence, then add these two sections, take the sequence, add these two sections, take the sequence, and continue, then you will be getting the output sequence Y of n. So the segments of the output sequence will overlap by P minus 1 samples. Now the overlapping samples of the segments are added to obtain the output sequence. So now let us go back to this again. Someone please tell me how this can be implemented via discrete Fourier transform, or how you can implement this by using circular convolution. See, what you have to do is you have to implement X0 of n controlled with the H of n. That's the linear convolution of X0 and n, X0 of n and H of n using a circular convolution operator, which means this you have to implement by circular convolution. In the class, we had seen the relationship between circular convolution. Here we are doing an L plus P minus 1 for circular convolution. How can you implement this circular convolution how can you implement this linear convolution by means of a circular convolution? Someone please explain. Let me see, Meenakshi, can you try?
Sir. So
Okay.
circular convolution becomes same as linear convolution when that endpoint becomes L plus P minus 1.
L plus P minus 1. For that, what you have to do is, this is an L point sequence. You have to zero pad and extend X0 of n to length L plus P minus 1. Right? Likewise, you had a filter of length P which also you have the zero pattern extend up to then L plus P minus 1. And then do circular convolution of the two sequences. The zero pattern and extended X0 of n and the zero pattern extended H of n. So that should give you the linear convolution like this. So this you can implement by means of a circular convolution. Likewise, this can be implemented by means of circular convolution. Right? Now, how can you implement this circular convolution by using a DFT? How can you implement the whole process by using a discrete Fourier transform? For that, let us apply the circular convolution theorem. Circular convolution theorem states that if you do circular convolution in the time domain, it's equivalent to multiplying the spectra in the frequency domain. Is that clear?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Meenakshi, can you explain how you can implement this in the frequency domain? How can you implement this in the frequency domain?
In the frequency domain, so we can find the individual DFTs of
DFTs. That is the L plus P minus 1 point the DFT of
yes,
the zero pattern extended X0 of n. And the
first
L plus
signal
P minus 1 point DFT of the filter. Right.
yes,
And then you
yes, sir.
multiply the individual DFTs and take the
Okay.
IDFT. So that should give you this, right? That should give you this linear convolution here. Because you have zero pattern and extended to L plus P minus 1. Okay, so which means therefore you will be able to implement the whole process by using you will be able to implement the whole process by using circular convolution and therefore by using DFTs, right? By using DFT. So this was a slide that we were discussing. So the segments of the output sequence will overlap by P minus 1 samples. The overlapping samples are added to obtain the output sequence. Now this can be implemented by means of an endpoint DFT where n is greater than L plus P minus 1. And this process you call as overlap AND. Overlap AND. So can someone tell me why it is called as overlap AND? Lakshmi, can you tell me why this is called overlap AND? You can make a guess. I am not giving you the answer, but I have given you all the inputs for giving the answer. Why is it called as overlap AND? Lakshmi, are you there? Hello? Am I audible? Arvind?
Hello.
Arvind, ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു കേൾക്കാമായിരുന്നു.
Yes, sir.
Why is it called overlap AND? Why is it called overlap AND? Can you make a guess? Why is it called overlap AND?
Because in this method, for each y of n, the overlapping samples are taken and then they are added.
They are added. That's the only reason. Overlapping
So-
samples are added. That's the only answer that I need. The overlapping samples are added. Therefore, we call this as overlap AND. Now, this method is called as overlap AND, and you see that for overlap AND, you don't require to do any DFT or circular convolution. You can just do linear convolution, do the process. You don't need to do circular convolution or DFT. However, you see that DFT can speed up your linear convolution operator. So overlap AND by itself is not tied to DFT or circular convolution. So here we make use of the principle that if you do an L plus P minus 1 circular convolution, you get the same result as that of linear convolution. Now, we will use the second observation regarding circular convolution, which was that when you did an L point circular convolution, you saw that the first P minus 1 samples were incorrect, and the samples from 0 to P minus 2 were incorrect, and the samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1 were correct. So some samples where you had this wraparound were incorrect and the other samples were correct. So we will use this result to perform block convolution. We will use this to perform block convolution. Instead of doing an L plus P minus 1 point circular convolution, we will now attempt to do an L point circular convolution. So again, that's also easily done. And that method is called as overlap same. And later we will be able to find out why it is called as overlap same. So here, you see that the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. First P minus 1 samples are incorrect. So what we will do is, we will start by 0 pre-padding the first block. So you had an infinite sequence. You divide this into blocks of length L. Now the blocks have length L, but however, you see that the first block is pre-padded by P minus 1 zeros. First block is pre-padded, pre-zero padded by P minus 1 zeros. Pre-padded, which means before the first sample you add P minus 1 zeros. And now, why you pre-pad this by first P minus 1 zeros is obvious, because in the result you have to discard the first P minus 1 samples, right? You see that in circular convolution, the first P minus 1 samples are incorrect because you have this wraparound overlap. So first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. So in the first block of, we will take the first block of length L like this. We will 0 pre-pad P minus 1 zeros to the sequence X of n. And then we will take the first block of X of n having a length L, which we call as X0 of n. Okay. And now the second block X1 of n is taken in such a way that the second block X1n overlaps the first block X0 of n by P minus 1 samples. That is, the P minus 1 samples, first P minus 1 samples of X1 of n are the same as the last P minus 1 samples of X0 of n. Is that clear? We select the second block as overlapping. Likewise, we select the third block like this, which means the first P minus 1 samples of the third block are the same as the last P minus 1 samples of the second block. Is that understood? So here what we do basically is we divide the signal X of n into blocks of length L, and each successive blocks overlap by P minus 1 samples. Each successive block overlap by P minus 1 samples. And now you can very easily understand why you have this overlapping by P minus 1 samples. Okay, so what we'll do is we will do L point circular convolution of each of these X0 of n with an H of n. So X0 of n is convolved, circularly convolved with H of n. So H of n had a length equal to P, and we have L is greater than P. So you have to put L minus P zeros at the end and make that length of the filter also equal to L, and then do an L point circular convolution. So that will give you L samples in the output sequence. L samples in the output sequence. And in the circular convolution, this Y0 P of n is the circular convolution of X0 of n and H of n. In the circular convolution, you see that the first L minus 1 samples are incorrect, right? Sorry, first P minus 1 samples are incorrect. And the last samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1, that is L minus P plus 1 samples are correct. So these samples are correct, same as the output. So here again, these samples are incorrect and therefore they can be discarded. Here again, these samples are incorrect and therefore can be discarded. And now all you have to do is take this section, which is correct, append that to this section which is correct, and append that to this section which is correct. Is it understood? So you have this followed by this followed by this. Why? Because you are now discarding the first P minus 1 samples in each block. Now this is called as overlap save. Can you tell me why it is called as overlap save? It is not overlap add. Now it is called as overlap save. Why is it called overlap save? Lakshmi class in the logo type hoidana.
Sir, that mic up work here, so I join.
Okay, right. Lakshmi, can you make a guess why you call this as overlap save?
Sir, is it because the samples are correct, but
there are samples that overlap. These samples are overlapping, but these samples are discarded, whereas these samples are saved. So you can assume that you are writing a program to implement this. So when you write a program to implement this, this will go into some array, this will go into another array, And
Yes, sir.
from the first array, you take these samples. You ensure that the last P minus n samples are saved. They are not discarded, whereas the first P minus n samples here are discarded, right? Now you might not be doing all this in parallel. Maybe you'll be doing this first. So maybe we'll be therefore reusing the array again for all the operations. So in the first pass of the program, you compute y0 p of n. First pass of the program, you compute y0. What you do is you save these samples and store it somewhere else. Okay. And in the second pass of the algorithm, you compute this, discard the first part, and then save and use the part that has been saved. Right?
Okay, sir.
Use the part that has been saved.
Save.
So therefore it is called overlap save. This part is now common for all this array is being reused. This part is being reused. So this part is saved somewhere and now reinserted. So therefore you call this as overlap
Save.
save. Overlap save.
Okay, sir.
Right. So L point circular convolution is performed between an L point input sequence and a P point filter such that L is greater than P with the input segments overlapping by P minus n samples. And the first segment is pre-padded by P minus n zeros. So you can also tell me, Lakshmi, you can also tell me why the first segment is pre-padded by P minus n zeros.
Sir, because since the first P minus 1 samples are overlap.
They are incorrect. They are incorrect. First P minus n samples are incorrect.
Correct.
So therefore it has to be discarded.
Yeah.
So we can fill it with some dummy data. So that dummy data can be all zeros. Okay, right. So when an L point sequence is circularly controlled with a P point sequence L greater than P, the first P minus 1 samples from 0 to P minus 2 are incorrect, and the last samples from P minus 1 to L minus 1 are correct, and the correct samples may be concatenated or patched together to form the complete sequence. So this is overlap save. Okay, so this is what I wanted to discuss about overlap add and overlap save. Now you also can appreciate that this overlap add algorithm and overlap save algorithm can be implemented by means of discrete Fourier transform, right? This can be implemented by means of discrete Fourier transform. So I hope you are seeing the whiteboard now. So I will write down the equation for the discrete Fourier transform. I will now barely take some 5 to 10 minutes more and then we will go into it. Maximum we will take some, let's say, 10 minutes. We might not even need 10 minutes. So we will write down the expression for the discrete Fourier transform and then let us revisit the discrete Fourier transform. So discrete Fourier transform states that x of k is equal to, someone please tell me what is the DFT? Sigma? Arjun Vishwanath or Dev Ganesh class in Dev Ganesh DFT equation or sigma? Parjo? Vinayak, are you there in the class? Vinayak class ille. Vinayak, are you there in the class? Anyone? Arjun Vishwanath?
Sir.
Okay. Arjun Vishwanath, DFT equation
N varies from 0 to n minus 1.
N varies from 0 to n minus 1. So we'll just read this as sigma n equal to 0 to n minus 1. Then
X of n.
X of n.
Wn raised to nk.
What is Wn?
E raised to minus j 2 pi by n.
Yeah. Okay, right. So is it complete? Or do you have to write anything else?
For n varies from 0 to n minus 1.
That is already here. N varies from 0 to n minus 1. What is
Okay. K varies from
0
to n minus 1.
N minus 1. 0 less than or equal to k less than or equal to n minus 1.
N minus 1.
Right. So in general, X of n can be a complex sequence. I told you that in general, X of n can be a complex sequence. So what I will just write here is sigma n equal to 0 to n minus 1. So assuming X of n is a complex sequence, so you can write a of n plus j b of n. So that is my X of n, right? So this is X of n. Multiplied by Wn is cos what? 2 pi by n nk minus j sine minus j sine 2 pi by n into nk. So using De Moivre's theorem. So this is your equation in fact for 0 less than or equal to k less than or equal to n minus 1. Okay. So for ease of representation, I will just replace cos 2 pi by nk by the same. This is a real sequence, so this maybe I will call as C of n, this as D of n. So maybe I will, for ease of representation, I will represent the second part as C of n plus j into D of n. So, so this is C of n plus j into d of n. Okay, and let me write this out, expand this out, and write this as sigma. This is sigma n is equal to 0 to n minus 1. So a of n into c of n minus b of n into d of n. So that's the real part, plus j into, so here I can write a of n into b of n plus b of n into c of n. Is it understood? Any doubts? B of n into c of n. Is it okay? So this is for 0 less than or equal to k less than or equal to n minus 1. So where c of n was equal to cos 2 pi by nk and d of n was equal to minus sine 2 pi by nk. So how many multiplications are required? How many complex multiplications are required to evaluate x of k? So that we had discussed in a previous class. So number of complex multiplications equal to, what is the number of complex multiplications? So here x of n is a complex valued sequence. Wn raised to nk is a complex valued sequence. You have one multiplication here. Likewise, you have n such terms. So there are n such multiplications to compute just one term for x of k. And you have n such terms for k, n such values of k. So number of complex multiplications is, tell me, what is the total number of complex multiplications?
Sir, n square.
N square. Let us look at the number of complex additions. Here, there is one time here, and now how many times are there like this? For this, you have n such terms. Now to add all these terms, you require n minus 1 additions, right? So if you have two numbers, let's say 5 and 2, if you want to add 5 and 2, there is 1 plus sign. If you have 3 numbers, you have 2 plus sign. If you have 4 numbers, you have 3 plus signs. Likewise. So if you have n terms, you have n minus 1 additions. If you have n terms, you have n minus 1 additions. So number of additions is therefore n minus 1 for one term, and there are n such terms. So what is therefore the total number of complex additions? Please tell me what is the total number of complex additions? N into n minus 1, right? Is it understood? Meenakshi, clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So there are n into n minus 1 number of complex additions. And now you measure the complexity of algorithm by the number of multiplications, because addition is a fairly simpler operation, much simpler operation compared to the multiplication. So therefore you mention the complexity of an algorithm by means of the number of number of multiplications. So you normally what you say is that the discrete Fourier transform is a operation of the complexity of the order n squared. So you say that the complexity of the discrete Fourier transform is of the order of n squared, which means that you require order of n square multiplications to implement the discrete Fourier transform. Okay, so that is a general representation. So you might see this or this kind of a representation when you refer to some literature on BSP. So we will not dwell much into this representation. Now let us look at the number of real multiplications. So what will be the number of real multiplications? Let us look at the number of real multiplications. So real, look at the real multiplications. So real multiplications, how many real multiplications will be there? Tell me how many real multiplications are there. Here you have a multiplication, 1. Here you have another multiplication. This is 3 and this is 4. So in place of this one complex multiplication, you have 4 real multiplications here. You have 4 real multiplications here. Right? So what is the total number of multiplications required here? Can you tell me what is the total number of multiplications required? Meenakshi, you can tell me what is the total
4n square.
That is 4n squared. 4n squared. So you require 4n squared real multiplications. So actually, when you look at the hardware implementation, or if you look at from the programming perspective, this is the load that you have to take care of. So you say that you have complex multiplications, n square complex multiplications, but this is the programming load that has to be taken care of, because this is the number of actual multiplications that has to be performed. So you require 4n squared number of multiplication operations. So the total power dissipated and the total time required would be therefore the time required for 4n squared multiplications and the power dissipated by 4n squared number of multiplications. Right? So that is important. So this value is the practical. This is 4n squared is more, it's the more relevant value compared to the number of complex multiplications. So now let us look at the number of real additions. Now that takes a bit more involved look into the number of real additions. So let us look at the number of real additions. So how many additions are there for one term? You see that there is one addition here. A and Cn is one term, B and Dn is another term. So you have to do one addition. This is A and Dn, and this is B and Cn. So you have to look at one addition here, right? So this is 2 additions per term. 2 additions per term. A and Cn minus B and Dn. So within this term itself, you require 2 additions. So how many such terms are there? So this goes into a real array. This goes into an imaginary array. This part goes into a real array, and this part goes into an imaginary array. So within one term itself, you have 2 additions. This part goes into real array, and this part goes into an imaginary array. So how many such terms are there? There are n such terms. There are n such terms. So therefore, you can say you have 2 into n multiplications just to compute A0 into C0 minus B0 into D0 plus J into A0 into D0 plus B into plus B0 into C0. That is to compute A0 into C0 minus B0 into D0. You have one addition. This subtraction is called as an addition. And A0 and D0 plus B0 and C0 is another addition. So that is two additions for just for n equal to 0. So there are n such terms. So therefore there are 2n such additions. 2n such additions. And now you also have to observe that A0 into C0 minus B0 into D0 has to be added with. For n equal to 1, that has to be added with A1 into C1 minus B1 into D1. It has to be added with again A2 into C2 minus B2 into D2, etc. up to An minus 1 into Cn minus 1 plus Bn minus 1 into Dn minus 1. So you have to add n such terms. So therefore you require n minus 1 additions here, and you also require n minus 1 additions here to add for all the terms. So that you require how many additions? How many more additions you require? Plus 2 into n minus 1. That is for just one term for x of k. You are evaluating this for x of 0. You have to evaluate for x of 1, x of 2, etc. So you require in total, you require n into 2n plus 2 into n minus 1, or in other words, you require n into 2n plus 2n minus 1, it will be equal to n into 4n minus 2 number of real additions. Is it clear? You have to understand how you arrived at this value. Number of real additions is n into 4n minus 2. So that is 4n squared minus 2n. 4n squared minus 2n, which you can also write as 4n squared minus 2n. So this is equal to 4n squared minus 2n. So therefore you can also write this as 2n into 2n minus 1. This is also equal to 2n into 2n minus 1. You have a number of ways in which you can remember this. You can remember this as n into 4n minus 2. That is what you get from this discussion. And since it's equal to 4n squared minus 2n, you can also remember this as 2n into 2n minus 1. Do you have any doubts? How we arrived at the number of additions? Lakshmi?
Sir,
Do you have any?
no, sir.
Have you understood how we arrived at the number of additions?
Yes, sir.
This is a bit more involved than the number of multiplications. Number of additions is n into 4n minus 2, which is also representable as 2n into 2n minus 1. So you see that this number is very large. So for example, let me look at n is equal to, in our previous example you saw so that n was equal to 10 raised to 5. So n 10 raised to 5 is just the number of samples for one. That is just the number of samples for 10 seconds. Number of samples for 1 second was 10 raised to 4. So let us see how many multiplications are required to compute the number of samples for compute the DFT for a sequence having a duration of 1 second. So x of n is recorded for 1 second. X of n is recorded for 1 second with a sampling interval of 0.1 millisecond. That is a sampling frequency of 10 kilohertz. So x of n has got how many samples? 10 raised to 4 samples. So now to compute the DFT of x of n, you require 10 raised to 4 the whole square, that is into 4. 4 into 10 raised to 4 the whole square number of real multiplications. It is a very large number. So you require 4 into 10 raised to 8 number of multiplications just to compute the DFT of a sequence having a length of equal to 1 second. You have recorded speech for only 1 second. And if you are going to try to find out the DFT, then you will require 4 into 10 raised to 8 number of multiplications. It is practically impossible to compute. For practical answer, x of n. You might require a supercomputer to compute DFT. So therefore, there is a case for fast algorithms to evaluate the discrete Fourier transform. So which is what we will discuss in the next class. Okay. Okay, so I will now go back to the module 1 content. There is a certain section that we will be discussing only later. So this is the content for module 1. We have completed our discussions on discrete Fourier transform, DFT as a linear transformation. Relation of the DFT to the other transforms has to be discussed. I have not discussed this now. Relationship of the DFT to the other transforms. I will discuss this after discussing the past methods to compute the DFT. So relationship of DFT to DFS we already have seen. Then we will see the relationship of DFT to the DFT, which we have discussed in to some extent. Then we will see the relationship between DFT and Z transforms. We will also see relationship of the DFT to the continuous Fourier transform, etc. And I will maybe require some 1 hour to discuss all those. So properties of DFTs we have seen. We have not seen too many examples which we have to discuss, and we will do some of the examples in the class. We will see circular. We have seen circular convolution. We have seen linear filtering methods based on DFT, which is linear convolution using circular convolution, overlap save and overlap add. And the last section, we will need some time to discuss the last section, which we again will revisit after seeing the past methods of the discrete Fourier transform. So, except for relationship of the DFT to other transforms and frequency analysis of signals using DFT, we have discussed the rest of the section for module 1. We will revisit these sections after seeing the parts of module 2, that is after discussing the past Fourier transforms. Then we will come back to this section. Okay. So I hope everyone has recorded their attendance on the chat box. Okay. If not, please record your attendance. So now this is this section that has been discussed is of utmost importance. So I request everyone to go through all that has been taught till date, because all those are required to start our discussions on the fast Fourier transforms. All these are connected sections. So unless you get the concepts of the first few classes very clearly, you might be expanding DSP in different ways. Instead of expanding DSP as digital signal processing, you might expand DSP as some other expansion. Okay, so we'll stop with this for today. Thank you all. I'll wait till you log out. Okay.